In my previous talk, we discussed about water, its importance and the quality issues and the various sources from which we get fresh water and the need to sustain them through rainwater harvesting. We also talked about rain as the predominant source of fresh water on earth, and harvesting rain is the only way that we could sustain both our surface and subsoil water sources. We will now in this talk discuss about rainwater harvesting in general, some historical perspectives, and rainwater harvesting in rural areas. Since we are all urban residents, let me introduce rainwater harvesting by looking at what is happening in all our cities. In almost all the cities in India, we have these twin problems of floods during monsoon and drought during non-monsoon months. Every city, just name it, we have these two twin problems. So, we will now analyze the reasons for these two problems. This is a city in North India, and this is Chennai during monsoon, and this is what happens when there is a drought. We run behind tankers and queue up behind tankers to fetch at least a pot of water. So, now let us analyze as to why these two problems occur. Let me first take floods. Cities get flooded for two important reasons. One is open spaces are shrinking in cities, and another is indiscriminate paving that both the society and the state are fond of. For example, take Chennai city. It had lot of water bodies till about 20-30 years back, but slowly they have all been filled up with garbage, and now buildings have come up in these water bodies. Essentially, shrinking of open spaces occurs this way. And paving, indiscriminate paving by the municipal corporation on public roads and by individuals within their houses. This leaves no unpaved area for rainwater to percolate into the soil, and that is why cities, roads and houses get flooded. Now, let us go to drought and see what happens. Why does it occur? There are a few important reasons for this. One is of course over exploitation of water sources. There is a migration from rural areas to urban areas, and therefore, all of them need water, and there is the demand keeps increasing year after year. And two, the attitude of the urbanites. For example, people living in cities have taken water for granted. They do not give as much importance to water as they give to other things. There is an apathy towards water, and there is also a lack of awareness among urban residents as to why they should sustain and give importance to their water sources. So, these are the two problems that we face in almost a large majority of cities in India, and both these problems can be solved if only we learn to harvest rain. Now, let us see what rainwater harvesting is all about. The textbook definition of rainwater harvesting is collecting rainwater when and where it falls for use during non-monsoon months. This flow chart explains to us rainwater harvesting completely. For example, the top two boxes tell us what are the two aspects of rainwater harvesting, what you can do with rainwater. You can collect rainwater in a plastic tank or a masonry tank for immediate use, or you put rainwater into the soil to sustain our groundwater source. So, these are the only two things that one can do with rainwater, and it is relevant in both rural areas as well as in urban areas. and also true in both the levels, at the micro and the macro. The macro will have to be done by the state or the government, and at the micro by individual households. So, this flow chart completely explains what rainwater harvesting is all about. What is the need for harvesting rain? These three reasons are important, gives you the need for harvesting rain. One, rain, as I said earlier, is the predominant source of fresh water on earth and the only way to sustain our secondary sources. Secondary sources are nothing but our rivers, our lakes, ponds and so on, and also groundwater. And most of our states are not rain starved. So, what do I mean by that? We get enough rain in almost all our states, that if you learn to harvest the entire quantity of rain that falls, we will be able to meet all our demands, and that is why I call all our states as not rain starved. And the third important reason is that it rains only for 60 to 90 days in a year, whereas we need water for all the 365 days in a year. So, unless we learn to capture this water that falls in the 60 to 90 days, we will run without water for the rest of the year. And so, these three are the important reasons as to why we should harvest rain. We should also understand that rainwater harvesting is not a new technology. It has been practiced by Indians for over 5000 years. It is also not an alternative. People sometimes feel that once you do not get water in your tap, you can harvest rain. That is not true. The water that we get in our taps is also rainwater. In fact, the water that we see all around us is nothing but rainwater, and that is the harvesting is the only way to get fresh water on this earth. Let us now look at the historical perspective. I will just take you through rainwater harvesting through the ages. For this, I would like to divide the entire past into three time periods. The first time period will be from minus infinity to 3000 BC. Minus infinity means the day when the earth was formed. From that day up to 3000 BC, I will tell you why the 3000 BC is a very important landmark. And the second time period from 3000 BC to 1800 AD, and the third time period from 1800 AD to 2005 or even 2014 till date. So, let me take the first time period. In this first time period, we should very clearly understand that rainwater got harvested even without human intervention. How did it happen? Rainwater got collected in rivers. The water that you find in all the rivers predominantly is rainwater, and that is how rainwater got harvested without human intervention. And there were natural depressions in which rainwater got collected. In fact, these natural depressions later on taught human beings as to how to dig ponds and lakes. That is why civilizations flourished on the banks of rivers, perennial rivers. We have several examples all over the world. We had the Amazon river, we had the Nile river, we had the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and the civilizations that flourished on its banks. And India, we had the very important Indus Valley civilization which flourished on river banks. The point is, we require water, and this water is available in rivers. So, man thought, why not settle down on the banks of rivers, so that he could fetch water every day from the river and use it. So, he did not even think of harvesting rain, since water was available nearby throughout the year. Let me now come to the second time period, which is from 3000 BC to 1800 AD. Now, why do I say 3000 BC? See, there was archaeological evidence to show that man had harvested rain in 3000 BC. So, during this period rainwater was also harvested with human effort. In addition to happening without human effort, it also happened with human effort. The first evidence of human effort in harvesting rainwater came from a place called Dholavira in Gujarat, which dates back to 3000 BC, which is almost 5000 years old. So, the kind of efficient system of Harappans developed for conservation, harvesting and storage of water could be seen in this ruins of Dholavira. This is the water harvesting conduit that was excavated in Dholavira, which dates back to 3000 BC. This is another photograph of the same conduit. There were extensive harvesting carried out in Dholavira. In fact, they also had open wells there, they had tanks, ponds which could collect rainwater. So, rainwater harvesting was completely exhibited in this site of Dholavira. So, we should really feel proud that Indians were the world leaders in harvesting rain. In fact, Indians had realized that food security could be achieved by harvesting paddy and wheat, and achieving water security through harvesting rain. This our ancestors had clearly understood, and therefore, there are several examples all over the country to show how our ancestors had harvested rain. Now, let us look at some of them. So, these methods depended on local conditions. There were systems for collecting rainwater. As I said, there are two aspects to rainwater harvesting. One is collection of rainwater in plastic tanks or masonry tanks or in earthen tanks, and then we can use it for recharge of the groundwater source. Both could be seen in our traditional methods. So, there were systems for collecting rainwater for immediate use at both micro and macro levels. The ones at the macro level also played the dual role of collection and recharge. I will just mention a few traditional rainwater harvesting systems that existed in different parts of India. As I said, every part of India had its own traditional rainwater harvesting systems. Let us take Rajasthan, which is supposed to be a desert state, the annual rainfall being very little, from 50 to 250 millimeters, and they had collected rainwater as such in what are called tankas and kundis for immediate use. Every house will have a tanka below the house. It is almost like a sump, which we call a sump these days, and the rooftop water was directed into these tankas to be used throughout the year. And at the macro level, they had surface water bodies called talabs, nadis, kadins and joheads. This is a photograph of the kundis, which was where rainwater was collected for immediate use. In fact, this is a very interesting thing. This is found on both sides of the road when you go to Rajasthan, and you can see the water that falling all around this kundis would get into the kundi through these holes here, and this was almost like a tank below the ground, and the rainwater thus collected would stay in the tank, and people will take water using a bucket from this part and use it for their daily needs. And this is of course, a surface water body which is called a talab, and where rainwater, what you see all over is nothing but rainwater. This rainwater is collected during monsoon, and this talabs cater to both immediate use as well as recharge, because the water stays here and slowly percolates into the soil to recharge the groundwater source. Yeah, this is another surface water body called the joheads, where what you do is you create an earthen bund all around, and the rainwater flowing from this side will simply get collected, because it cannot go beyond the bund, it will just stay here and this is also used for daily needs, particularly for irrigation and also for recharge. The water stays here. See, in rainwater harvesting there is one important principle: you make running water walk and walking water crawl and crawling water stand. Essentially, you should make rainwater remain within your soil for a longer period, so that you can either use it for immediate purposes or it will slowly percolate into the soil. So, this is one important principle in rainwater harvesting. Yeah. So, this is so far as surface water bodies are concerned. Now, they also had groundwater bodies, which are called bowolis and jalras. The jalras are nothing but the community step wells, and they also had quays. Quays is nothing but an open well. So, this is a photograph of both bowolis and jalras, and this is nothing but a step well. This is you can see the architectural beauty, the marvel. You can see that steps leading to the water. This is the water that is collected. This is nothing but an open well at the macro level. So, you can see steps all over, and people just go down to take out some water from these step wells. In fact, we also have step wells in South India, particularly the temple tanks. For example, the temple tanks that we see all over Tamil Nadu, Andhra and Karnataka are nothing but step wells. Yeah, this is the quay, is nothing but an open well which is closed. In fact, people say that they even put a lock here, so that people will not steal water from this quay. So, this is nothing but an open well, but the point is the open well will have a narrow opening at the top, and as we go down it widens. This, they say, reduces evaporation loss. So, they had designed their open well. See, it is not uniformly cylindrical as we see now, it is very narrow at the top, and as we go down it is larger, the diameter becomes larger, so that the evaporation is minimized, evaporation wastage is minimized. Let us now look at the neighboring state of Gujarat, which, as we all know, on one side we have the sea. This is not as bad as Rajasthan so far as rainfall is concerned. We have something like 500 to 900 millimeters of rain falling in Gujarat, and they also had the same traditional water bodies like Rajasthan, the jalras and the boworis for collection and use, which are the step wells as I told you, or the quays for extracting groundwater. In Bihar, Bihar is on the banks of river Ganges. It is a very fertile state, but still they had a good rainwater harvesting systems. They used to divert rainwater flowing in the river into what are called pines, which are called channels, to irrigate their paddy fields. So, states which had bad rainfall also harvested rain very well. States which had good rainfall also harvested rain very well, like Bihar. I will now mention the traditional rainwater harvesting system that existed in South India. In all the three states of South India, namely Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, and it dates back to 2nd century AD, and interestingly it is also found in Sri Lanka. The same kind of system that I am going to mention is also found in Sri Lanka. This is called the Aries system. Aries is a Tamil word, and this is essentially a chain of tanks used predominantly for irrigation, where they collected the runoff water from its own catchment, and in all the three states put together there is something like 150,000 Aries, with Andhra Pradesh having the maximum of 70,000 and Karnataka and Tamil Nadu each having about 40,000 Aries even today. And interestingly, most of them are interconnected. What happens is, when one irrigation tank or the Aerie gets filled up, the overflow goes and fills up the neighboring villages irrigation tank, and so on and so forth. Therefore, water getting wasted by falling into the sea is minimized drastically. Yeah, this is a drawing of an airy where you have this is the water spread area and this is the catchment. So, the rain falling here flows into these water body. In fact, these are not dug out ponds. What they did was they identified the lowest portion in the village and they created a bund all around and collected whatever rain that fell there. So, that the rain collected there could not escape, and this is essentially, as I said, used for irrigation, and these are the paddy fields and these are what are called sluices. So, these are iron doors which are opened every day in the morning for allowing water to flow into the paddy fields and closed in the evening. So, this is an irrigation tank, and interestingly this portion is called the overflow weir. In Tamil it is called the kalangal, and suppose the airy gets filled up, it will overflow through this point only and flows into the area of the neighboring village and so on and so forth. So, this is a very interesting traditional rainwater harvesting systems that are found in South India, and even these airies are of two kinds. One is called the system airy, which is both river fed and rain fed. There are non-system airies which are only rain fed. These airies are called differently in Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka. In Andhra Pradesh it is called cheruvu, and in Karnataka it is called kere. This is a drawing of a system airy where there is a river flowing and you see the airies on both sides of the river, and the water flowing in the river is diverted into these irrigation tanks or airies. So, that otherwise what would have happened, the water running in the river would have gone and drained into the sea and lot of wastage would have occurred. Instead, now it is collected in these irrigation tanks, and as I said earlier, these irrigation tanks themselves are interconnected. When one overflows, it is collected in the neighboring villages tank and so on. So, this is a very interesting, very innovative way of harvesting rain. Yeah, this is the non-system airies. There are no rivers nearby, but still there is a catchment. So, it collects the rain that falls all around it into these water bodies, which themselves are interconnected, and you have paddy fields in between, and this is essentially used for irrigation. There were other water bodies in Tamil Nadu called Ooranis, which were drinking water ponds. Yeah. So, in this table I have given a complete list of the traditional water bodies that are found in almost all the states of India, starting from Andhra Pradesh. See, they had irrigation tanks, they had lakes and ponds which were used for drinking water, then they have groundwater sources, wells and step wells, and then they have embankments which are called bunds, and then they also had collection and use systems at the micro level called tankas. I said tankas and the kundis, etc. This is a complete list of traditional rainwater harvesting systems in a few states in India. Yeah, these are some of the other states like Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Nagaland, Odisha, Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh and West Bengal. So, these are called by these names. In fact, we can even do a Google search by mentioning these names, and you are likely to get very good information. We have also published a book about the airy system of Tamil Nadu. There is another interesting book published by the Center for Science and Environment in New Delhi, an NGO called Dying Wisdom. In fact, they have documented almost all the traditional harvesting systems that are found in the entire country. Yeah, now let us go to the third and last time period, which is from 1800 AD to 2014 AD, which is till date. This period witnessed the decay of all traditional water harvesting systems. Why and how did it happen? See, during the British rule, the Britishers did not understand the importance of these traditional water harvesting systems, and secondly, they did not like the village communities managing these water bodies, because they thought once it happens, then the village community will become powerful and will not probably listen to them. Therefore, what they did was they took the entire water bodies under their control and said they will manage them, and that is how the Public Works Department was created during the British rule, and they started managing them, and once they started doing it, the villagers lost interest in their own water bodies, and therefore, these water bodies need some kind of maintenance every year. The silt deposited in these water bodies will have to be removed, and it is carried and put in the paddy fields, and that was not allowed to happen during the British rule. So, these water bodies were silted up, the effective volume came down, it could not harvest as much water as it was doing previously, and therefore, they were neglected by the community on the one hand and by the state on the other hand during British rule. So, British wanted to be the provider of water and took over the management and ownership of water bodies, which was not a very healthy practice, but anyway it happened, and that led to the decay of all the traditional water harvesting systems in India. And of course, the other reasons are the increase in urbanization leading to destruction of water bodies. As I said earlier, almost all the cities had their own traditional water bodies, which were converted by filling up with garbage. They were converted into buildings. Chennai is a good example of how several water bodies were filled up, and you do not see any water body within a state, because they have all been converted into sites for construction. And there is also a lack of awareness and apathetic attitude among urbanites, which is not a good thing to happen. And the ARE system, as I said, is in a state of disrepair because of the neglect. A few industries have been constructed on them or blocking the inlet channel. See, the inlet channel is a very important part of the system, because only through that water flows and gets collected in the ARE. Once you cut the inlet channel or destroy the inlet channel, then the ARE will not get water, and that is how they were completely destroyed. At least the AREs around big important cities have been destroyed. In several others, we discharge domestic effluents, industrial effluents, and so on, because we see that as a useless place, and therefore, you can dump a lot of waste into it. That is not a very healthy practice to do, but anyway it is all happening. Thank you very much.